What was your takeaway from this most recent story in Mar-a-Lago? A second North Carolina man that was, found armed there on the resort.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a shocker because we've seen so much of this. We've got two assassination attempts against the sitting president and presidential candidate at the time. We've got other, 20 somethings, late teens committing violent acts and acting out in this manner. So it's not a shocker that someone would try to get into Mar-a-Lago. In fact, it's the 10th time it's happened since 2017 at least. So I think what's surprising a little bit is just the amateur nature of it. You can tell that this wasn't well planned, going in the exit at 1:30 in the morning with the gas can and the shotgun, and very rapid apprehension and possibly suicide by cop and raising his weapon to three armed officers.
I think a big thing all of us are always trying to find out when there's something like this is kind of the why, especially when we understand that, like, his family has been on record saying that they're all pretty avid Trump supporters. I mean, is there anything that you could take away from that, or anything, like any analysis that you have on the why in a situation like this?
I mean, yeah, as a law enforcement officer and taking in consideration the changes over the years with the internet, social media, and all of that. I mean, I think there's been an epidemic of young, disaffected individuals in their late teens and early 20s. I think just living on the internet, living in these websites and gaming rooms and chat rooms, and just picking up, then a ideology that our rational minds just can't get around, but they grab onto it and they use that as an anchor. There has to be a bad person. The failure can't be me, and they take action in this manner. It's not rational, but it's happening.
And then in this case, I know the previous case, the guy was, taken into custody recently, sentenced to life. How far will an investigation go now that the person that they were looking for is dead?
Yeah, obviously there's no prosecution to pursue or protect here, but the FBI, which has exclusive jurisdiction in matters like this involving presidential, any crimes against a president or a sitting president or vice president, they're going to look at everything just to make sure there's no co-conspirators, there's no enablers, there's no aiders and abettors. And they're going to look at it from the standpoint of motivation, because they have a behavioral science project ongoing. As some people refer to them as the serial, the profilers, who studied the serial killers and other violent actors. And they're going to look at motivation and see what motivated and what enabled this person to get up and do this. Was there some indoctrination by someone or something on the internet that's targeting young people like this? So there has to be a full-on investigation just to get to co-conspirators, if there are any, and motivation.
And how long does that process usually take? Is that like, weeks, months, years?
I think this one will know a lot more, and they will have, know a lot within a week or two. I mean, they're going to look at everything that he's ever touched, every electronic device, every social media site, every gaming site, anything he's ever written, his friends, his family. They'll be interviewed. They'll look at his financial transactions, his travel, his internet searches. I mean, there's just a long, exhaustive list, but I think they have a pretty good picture of it by now, because this is not complicated. He's a 21-year-old, and there isn't a whole lot of life history there to look at.
I think that's all I got. Is there anything that you found particularly like interesting about all this that you've picked up on that I didn't ask about?
No, I mean, again, I just sort of dwell on the topic, the subject of these young individuals acting out like this, and you wonder I don't think we saw this during my 25 years in the FBI. Just so many young people going off like this and taking, we had John Hinckley, back in the 80s. He was a young guy that went after the president and tried to assassinate President Reagan, but this the age dynamic here and the influences that they're exposed to, and teenage years and post-teenage years are tough times, and I think that this hits them right at the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, we just got done covering the Austin Thompson trial over in the
Yeah.
Headingham neighborhood, and they talked about his like internet search histories, how it just like kind of becomes a black hole, especially for this
Yeah.
like COVID age of
Right.
kid, right? Like it's
Right.
kind of all they
Yeah.
know, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got 9 grandkids. I got one who's 17. The oldest one is 17, and I worry about him. And got all kinds of crazy things going on with catfishing. We've seen suicides that stem from being approached by what they thought was a pretty young girl, and they start exchanging photos, and next thing you know, we got 18, 20 suicides because it turns into an extortion. And there's just so many bad things happen in that space, which is largely unregulated. And there's just so many things that our young people, before they're capable of handling it, are exposed to.